Hey folks, Dave the Not So Evil Viking 13 here, back again with Watch Dogs, and a modification here on PC that is finally allowing me to actually play the game again. You all might have noticed that Watch Dogs kind of dropped off after my first two videos, and this is more or less Ubisoft's fault. When the game first came out, I had the most incredibly severe stuttering in the game that you can imagine. My game would freeze up as I drove around for 10 to 15 seconds at a time, sometimes even 30 seconds, just total frame rate freeze. The freezing would get a little bit better if I lowered the settings, especially the texture resolution, but at that point Watch Dogs becomes a very blurry and very low-res looking game, and I wanted to avoid that as much as possible. So for the most part, because I was getting into the game and actually enjoying the city of Chicago and the story that was being crafted in Watch Dogs, I just kind of dealt with it. I just played through it. Then a mod creator, whose name is The Worst, created a modification, mainly just tweaking in-game settings, shaders, stuff like that. Not to underestimate what he did, but a lot of it was just working with what the game offered. This mod creator created the Worst mod, named after, I guess, his username, and this ironically named Worst mod, for me, completely changed my game experience. With just this one small download and installation, this tweaked modification completely eliminated my micro stutter and my macro stutter, those massive freezes. Even with all the settings cranked up, with 4x TSAA, the game ran almost butter smooth. It was after installing this Worst mod that the game became like crack for me. I could not stop playing it for a while. With my frame rate more or less smoothed out, and with the game looking better thanks to the Worst mod, the combination of all those technical issues being smoothed out, plus the "you are Batman with guns" gameplay, had me hooked on the game. And then the official Ubisoft patch came out, the larger Ubisoft patch, in mid to late June. And for me, that patch immediately brought back all of my micro stuttering and all of my macro stuttering. Again, as I drove around, the game would freeze up, making slight movements with the controller almost impossible. And when driving, you would overcorrect or undercorrect, or your frames would jump and all of a sudden you'd be into a wall. Chases, fixer missions, everything were just, it was just a chore to play. And even though I wanted to continue the story, it really was hard to. So I kind of backed off a bit, and I waited for the Worst mod to rescue me once again. Sure enough, just this week, a newest version of the Worst mod came out, version 0.97c, and although a 0.8 version had come out before that, that one really hadn't helped my micro stutter, so I was really counting on 0.97 to be the one that did it. Sure enough, once again, my micro stutter and macro stutter is gone, and the game is almost smooth. It is 100% playable once again, and I am looking forward to diving back into the story and back into all of these side missions, which I think I'm pretty close to completing the large majority of those side missions. The game really is great. Between the Ubisoft patch and the newest version of the Worst mod, I really didn't gain a whole lot of frame rates. Even on an i7 3930K that's overclocked to 4.2 GHz, with 16 gigs of RAM and 2 GTX 680s in SLI, my frame rates aren't anything to write home about. For the most part, I'm hovering in the low to mid 30s. It's pretty stable, it's just not as smooth as it should be for what it looks like. The game looks good, but not 30 FPS good on this kind of rig. The biggest advantage that Worst mod brings is really just the frame rate stability. It's not adding a bunch of frames, it's just stopping that stutter and making the input for the game from my controller or mouse a lot smoother as well. The macro stutter, those large freezes, are obviously a huge problem, but even the little bit of SLI and I'm not even sure how to describe it, just the overall micro stutter was making the controls a lot less responsive than they should have been. This definitely got me killed a bunch of times doing side and main missions. So that's my praise for the worst mod. I want to dig into the changelog here just a bit and look at what the worst mod actually does. Here are the changes for 0.97c. There have been most obviously changes made to the depth of field system. That's the kind of background blur that comes and goes. That's more of a cosmetic change and it's up to user preference. But the depth of field in Watch Dogs does look good, so I don't mind seeing it as long as it doesn't block my perspective as I'm trying to complete missions. Additionally, his original goal with the worst mod was to try to bring the game back to its E3 predicted graphics, which we most definitely don't have right now in Watch Dogs. This is done through tweaking the textures themselves, the lighting, the saturation, the camera, as well as most importantly the shaders. That's how light reflects and is bounced off of surfaces in the game. That's one of the better changes that have been made as far as graphics go in the worst mod. The shaders definitely look much closer to the E3 demo, even if we don't have a lot of the extra particle effects like the fog and the trash and all those small details. One of the largest lighting changes that is especially noticeable at night was headlights from vehicles now actually cast shadows. Each headlight is more or less a point light. They cast shadows on other cars, on you, on pedestrians, on more or less everything. This occasionally causes flickering, but for the most part it looks really good. Thanks to the worst mod, Watch Dogs now uses higher res textures for clouds, sparks, smoke, fire, a lot of ground textures. A lot of those missing textures have been tweaked and corrected thanks to this mod. Honestly guys, the changelog is pretty large. In this modification they've touched on just tons of areas in the game. It's a really impressive amount of work for what began as just a slight tweaking mod. They've gone above and beyond to make the game look as good as possible and run as good as possible. So I'm going to drop the link to the mod in the description, as well as the full changelog that you guys can check out down there. Now, the worst mod has been out since early to mid-June, and when it first came out there was a lot of discussion on YouTube and on blogs and other news sites about, did Ubisoft actually disable features on the PC version just to make the game more consistent with the consoles? I personally feel like this is more of a conspiracy theory. I don't really see, no matter how big the pile of money might have been, an executive going, sure Sony, sure Microsoft, we're gonna disable nice features on our PC version just to bring it more in line with consoles. That's not really a smart decision. They would know from a technical perspective that eventually they'd be found out and that people aren't completely blind. People would notice this. I think that a much more realistic explanation is just that these features were unfinished because of time and because of resources and because of bugs. As neat as the dynamic headlights are in the worst mod, occasionally in previous versions I would get a lot of flickering with them. That has since stopped, but that obviously was a feature that was not 100% working. And having a bunch of point lights on the headlights that are dynamically flickering all over the place is a lot more distracting than not having those headlights at all. So I can see why Ubisoft might have been reluctant to launch the game with a few of these higher end and more intensive features. That's what's so cool about modding here on PC is modders can be a bit more dangerous. They don't have a customer base, a paying customer that can complain to them about it. There's no real responsibility for those modders. They can be adventurous, try things out, and if it breaks things, well, sorry, it was free, you knew the risks. As someone who has actually worked on mods in the past, I do appreciate the time that these guys have put into the worst mod. It has once again made the game playable for me, and I'm really looking forward to diving back into the main storyline and getting back into the game after this long period of waiting for it to be playable once again. I hope you guys have enjoyed this look at the worst mod and at Watch Dogs. I might bring you a few more videos about Watch Dogs as I continue through it. Not 100% sure there. Just know that if you see the game on sale here in the future, I would actually say pick it up. I am still having a ton of fun in it. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will catch you all next time.
I'm not gonna miss a chance to show a drug boss what I think about his business. He won't come back again after he's met me.
I'm Batman.
Sounds like we got company. Hear me? Be careful. Where'd that come from? Look out! Find the sniper. There he is! Where are you going? Let's just get started. Oh, come on! Don't run! I got nothing here. Moving on. Did you see that? Oh!